Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're exploring a seriously fascinating framework from our source material that actually maps out the fundamental architecture of human understanding. So, how do our minds actually comprehend the universe? I know, it sounds pretty heavy, but this model breaks it down so beautifully that it'll honestly completely change how you look at reality. Just think about it for a second. If I ask you what reality is, you might knock on your desk, point to the chair you're sitting on, and say, well, it's this. It's the physical stuff, right? But is reality really just what we can touch, weigh, and measure? What about mathematics? What about the laws that govern your country, or even your own sense of self? As you'll see in just a moment, there is so much more to reality than meets the eye. And assuming the physical world is the only true reality, that leaves us with a massive blind spot. Okay, let's dive right into this. We're going to start by outlining the architecture of knowing, and then we'll explore 4 specific domains of reality: science, math, social reality, and awareness without ego. Finally, we'll put it all together into one complete framework. First up, the architecture of knowing, and the dimensions that actually define truth. The foundational concept we have to grasp here is that all human understanding, literally every single thing you or I could possibly know, unfolds dynamically within consciousness. The source material proposes that we can map out everything we know based on 2 intersecting dimensions. The first one is this knowledge objective, meaning it's a fact regardless of who is looking, or is it subjective, meaning it inherently involves a conscious observer? So that's our horizontal axis. The vertical axis asks a different question. Does this knowledge depend on physical objects and subjects to exist, or is it completely independent of them? When you cross those 2 dimensions, you get a really elegant 2x2 matrix. Think of this as our mental map for today's explainer. Over on the objective side, we have science, which deals with physical objects, and logic and math, which don't. Then on the subjective side, we have our intersubjective reality, and finally, non-egoic experience. We're going to walk through each of these 4 rooms one by one. Let's move into our first quadrant, science, or objectivity with objects. This is the empirical world. It's the domain most of us are incredibly familiar with. When we think of hard facts, this is exactly where our minds go for sure. In this quadrant, we investigate the physical world through observation, experimentation, and strict measurement. We're talking about disciplines like physics, chemistry, biology, neuroscience, and engineering. Basically, if you can put it in a beaker, smash it in a particle accelerator, or look at it under a microscope, it lives right here. Its truths are entirely about tangible objects and measurable phenomena. But here's the crucial point. In this scientific mode, truth is never absolute. By definition, empirical truth is provisional. It's continually evolving and remains wide open to revision the very second someone presents new physical evidence. And yeah, even if it bruises a few scientists' egos along the way, science isn't about finding some unchangeable dogma. It's this ongoing, highly dynamic process of refining our measurements of the physical world. Next up, we cross into logic and math, which is objectivity without objects. Now, what's really interesting about this domain is that while we are still dealing with hard objective facts, we have completely stripped away the physical objects. We don't need beakers or microscopes anymore. There's this stark contrast between our 2 objective domains. In science, truth is empirical. If the physical data changes, the truth updates. But in logic and math, truth is necessary. A mathematical theorem relies on formal axioms and definitions. Think about it. No physical experiment in the world can refute the Pythagorean theorem. You can't just go out into the woods, measure a triangle, and prove a core rule of geometry wrong. The only way to refute mathematical truth is by finding a logical contradiction within the formal system itself. And this perfectly reinforces the idea that objectivity does not require something you can physically touch. That's pretty mind-blowing when you think about it. You can have absolute, rigorous objectivity that exists purely through logical consistency. 2 + 2 = 4. Regardless of whether there are literally 0 physical apples in the entire universe to count. It is a strictly formal reality. Let's jump across the matrix to social reality, which is subjectivity with subjects. Over here on the subjective side, we explore our intersubjective reality. These are things that exist solely because conscious human beings collectively agree that they do. Just consider things like language, culture, ethics, law, religion, economics, institutions, and traditions. Take money, for example. A $20 bill is literally just a piece of paper with some ink on it in the physical world. But in our intrasubjective reality, it has a massive, undeniable, objective influence over our entire lives. None of these things exist in a purely physical state, yet our communities collectively sustain them. In this mode, truth isn't measured with a ruler, and it certainly isn't deduced through mathematical axioms. Truth here is negotiated and socially validated. It's neither a purely objective physical fact, nor is it merely a private, isolated experience stuck in your own head. It emerges entirely through human communication, mutual recognition, cooperation, and shared meaning. I mean, our whole civilization essentially runs on this specific mode of knowing. And that brings us to the fourth quadrant, contemplative reality, or awareness without ego. This is by far the most counterintuitive room of our matrix. Now, the original model calls it subjectivity without subjects, but our source material notes that kind of sounds like a contradiction. So to make this incredibly deep concept clearer, we're calling it awareness without ego. This addresses the deepest contemplative traditions in human history, like Buddhism's Yogacara and Madhyamaka traditions, as well as Advaita Vedanta. They suggest that pure awareness doesn't actually require a permanent observer or an enduring ego. Experience can unfold without a fixed you standing behind it pulling the levers. Knowing in this state becomes direct, immediate, and non-dual. The source material phrases this so perfectly. Let me just read it exactly as it's written. Experience persists even though no permanent, independent self is found. Instead of a fixed ego, consciousness is understood as a dynamic, flowing stream of dependent processes. It's the ultimate form of independence from a rigid subject. The awareness is totally there, but the self as a solid, permanent object has vanished. And in this contemplative quadrant, truth is fundamentally different from the other three. It's not an experiment, it's not a mathematical proof, it's not a socially negotiated law. Here, truth is simply directly realized. It is pure, immediate knowing. Finally, let's zoom out and look at the complete framework, integrating all four domains. Stepping back to look at the complete philosophical framework we've just assembled, this brilliantly illustrates how these aren't competing theories. Not at all. They are complementary dimensions of the exact same universe. We have an empirical reality investigated by science. We have a formal reality explored through logic and math. We have a social reality constituted through our shared meanings. And we have a contemplative reality disclosed through direct awareness beyond the ego. These are four irreducible domains. It's like a giant puzzle. If you throw any one of these out, you are missing a massive piece of what it means to be alive and to know things. Which brings us to the overarching thesis of this entire framework. Reality absolutely cannot be reduced to either just material objects crashing into each other or just isolated minds dreaming up the world. A complete architecture of knowing demands that we integrate all four of these modes simultaneously: scientific inquiry, formal reasoning, social participation, and contemplative insight. They all belong together in one unified philosophical map. So I'll leave you with this final provocative thought. As you go through your day today, as you check your bank account, as you measure ingredients for dinner, or as you feel a rare moment of quiet awareness, I want you to ask yourself, which mode of reality are you currently operating in? Because once you start seeing the world through these four distinct lenses, your understanding of reality will never be exactly the same. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. I really hope you found this as mind-expanding as I did.